So just a little bit more about me. I've been in the Valley for a dozen years now. I came out here, thought I'd move for 2 or 3 years, and then 2 or 3 years passed, and then suddenly it was 5 years, and decided maybe I'd go back to the East Coast where I'm from, and then decided I just couldn't. I'd done my time in snow and I wasn't ready to go back. So I've been here for 12 years now, and to me the Bay Area is very much home. It's very interesting because what drew me out here was the boom. It was 2000, it was exciting, the NASDAQ was off the charts. I show up Jan 2000, and very shortly after things fell apart. So I got to enjoy the ride for a little while, and luckily survived it. But you know, the Bay Area is a great place to be. So I wanted to get a sense of a little bit of the folks in the room. So who here is working on consumer products? Okay, so quite a few going after consumer market. And who's working on products more for the enterprise side? All right, so we've got a mix of both. How about mobile? Anybody? Okay, all right. Good, that gives me a little bit of a sense of what's going on in the room. So let me tell you a little bit about Citrix. Who had heard of Citrix before they came here today? All right, so a few people. GoToMeeting, is that a brand that people are familiar with? A lot of people, it's interesting, that's what they think of when they think of Citrix, and it's a very important part of our business in terms of web collaboration, but it's it's small compared to the virtualization side of our business. So that's really where a lot of our bread and butter is. And at the end of the day, we have a single mission, which is to create a world where people can work or play from anywhere. I mean, that's the big picture vision. We realize in today's workforce people are mobile, and they want to be able to take their work with them to other offices, when they travel, when they're at home, when they're on vacation. We have a place, the way we operate these days is that we're intermingling work and play. It's not a clear separation. It's no longer the 9-to-5 day that it used to be. So just quickly to give you a little bit of a better sense of our products, there are two key things that we focus on. We focus on the end user and what's important in their world, and that's really about a mobile work style. And in other words, we have to support them and give them the data they need when they're on the go, the applications they need when they're on the go, and also the ability to collaborate. Now, from an IT person's perspective, this can make you panic because you think these people are moving, they're going around, they've got all this data. This could be a scary thing. So we're making sure from an IT perspective that we're providing really secure solutions in the cloud that allow them to build these solutions, scale solutions, and deliver them quickly and securely to their end users. So at the end of the day, you get an IT organization that's really happy. They've got security around their products and applications, and you've got end users who are living the dream of being able to work and play from anywhere. So in a nutshell, that's what we're all about. So let's dig in and talk about design. So design is fairly young for Citrix, which is kind of fascinating, right? The company, when I joined, was having its 20th birthday. And I got a call from a recruiter who said, why don't you come on over and join Citrix? We're doing some really cool things with regards to design. And I said, well, yeah, what? And they said, we're just starting, and we're turning 20. So I thought, well, that just sounds terrifying. Who would want that job? No way. But when I came down and interviewed, I really understood that they were truly committed. They recognized primarily for the past 20 years they'd very much been a back-end company, doing a lot of things behind the scenes for IT admins, and now they were putting products in end users' hands. And they realized if they were going to make that transition successfully, design absolutely was going to be key to that component. So let's just talk about the state of design. It used to be that features were king. And I think this applies both for the admin and IT space and enterprise space, and also for the end user space. I mean, I think about what I used to go by as stereo. I would want the stereo that had the most features and the most functions. I wasn't necessarily thinking about the thing that was the easiest to use, because back in the day most things were not all that easy to use. You would get out your instruction book and you'd read and learn how to use it. So features were important. Same for IT. When they would choose what products they would buy and deploy to users, it was about, does it have features 1 through 10? And if it does, then it's going to beat the company that's only going to have 5 features. So when I lived in that world and I was trying to tell people, you know, usability and design, it's really important, this was the message I would send. I would talk about simplicity and say, it's all about return on investment. If it's simpler, you'll get more people adopting. You'll get increased user productivity. People will be faster and more efficient with their tasks. We'll decrease training and support costs. That's a really good thing. You don't want to have people calling your support lines all day long. You don't want to have your customers having to roll out all kinds of training or have to develop all kinds of manuals. Those are good things. And ultimately, it's going to increase sales and renewal. If you've got people using the product, they're successful with it, then people are going to want to buy upgrades. But it's a new world. These messages all still apply, but thankfully I've got a lot of things working in my favor now that help promote the value of design. And it's really about the end users. I mean, it's so fascinating working in the enterprise space now. There's push coming from both sides. You have got a new generation of workers who are coming to the workforce and have grown up in front of computers and don't want to tolerate a crappy experience. They want a great experience. They want to use good tools in their workplace. When I interview a lot of candidates, they ask me, will I get a Mac? You know, what do I use? What kind of software will you give me? These things are really important to them, and they're going to choose companies to work for based on a lot of the tools that they get to use. It really sets the tone. Then you get the flip side. You get the people who are in the boardroom, and they are coming with their smartphones and their iPads, and they're saying, IT, make it work. I want to use an iPhone. I want to use an iPad. I don't care. Figure it out. So there's suddenly this tension, and IT's going, oh my God, I'm being forced out of the equation here. I need to figure out how to make all these devices work. I'm losing control. So instead of losing control, we're really trying to push the message that it's not losing control. You can be the hero. I mean, how great is it to have happy and productive users? So today, you know, this is a lot of the message that we talk about, that if you look at features along the bottom and you look at user delight along the y-axis, there's really this sweet point. When you start out and you're young and scrappy, sometimes people are like, I don't really get it. What's the value in this thing? I'm not sure. And then as you get more features, people start to love it and say, this is a really cool product. I like this. This is fantastic. And this is the area you want to stay. But very quickly, as there's demand for more features and functions, you can end up in this terrible place where people are going, what happened? I don't know how to use this thing anymore. It's bombarded with features. So you've really got to find that sweet spot and also figure out, as you do need to add more features and functions, what does this mean for your product? The interesting correlation as well is along the bottom, number of features again, and on the Y, cost of ownership. It's the same sweet spot. That, you know, that's where people are really going to get the value in your product. So it's a really precise equation that you need to look at. So I want to talk a little bit about what do we mean by design. It's a very abstract term. In a lot of cases, people think of pixels and graphics and icons, and absolutely that's part of it, but design is much, much more than that. So I really like this maturity continuum and to think about design and its possibility using this framework. So I'm going to just step you through the levels here. And the first level is at the bottom, no design, not even thinking about it. Who here has used BART? That thing is so bad. I tell you, I go on BART probably once every 2 years just because it's not in my transit world. And every time I know I've got to take a BART ride, I panic because I think, oh God, that ticket thing is so bad. There are people lined up behind me. They're cursing me. Why is she taking so long? Because this thing is awful. I truly, it was about 6 weeks ago, I had to take a BART ride, and I almost bought a $43 ticket. How did this happen? I have no idea. But luckily, I hit the cancel button in time to save myself. So they just clearly built something that delivers the functionality, check the box, but what an awful experience. I don't think you could make it worse. So the next one is style, and this is where a lot of people start. Well, we'll just make it look pretty. We'll make it look really great. And people will want to buy it because it looks so cool and slick. And it's interesting. That strategy worked quite well, 5 to 10 years ago, because by the time people caught on that your product wasn't that great, it was too late. In this day and age where people are talking, no way. You're going to get busted really, really quickly. The people's BS meters are very sensitive, and before people make significant investments, they go online to see what people are saying about your product. So just having something that looks cool is not enough. It's still important, but it's not enough. So level 3 is function and form. transform, and often that's taking an existing product, and sometimes people think, well, if it isn't broken, don't fix it. But there really are great opportunities in this area to take something and reinvent it. A good example are the OXO products, the Good Grips products. This is a case where someone was actually designing this product for someone with arthritis, a bigger hand, easier to grip, and it turned out the larger population loved it and thought, this is great, I really like holding these. If I'm holding something else, it's quite slippery and uncomfortable. So they really took something that was out there and made it that much better. Then you can get to the level of problem solving, and this is where you know there are known problems in the space, and you see, hey, I've got an idea or I've got an opportunity, I think I can fix that need or that problem. The automotive industry is a really great example. We've seen a couple examples of that as of late. One is the Prius, right? They recognized that people wanted a green car, they wanted something that was going to be more fuel efficient, and they delivered on that need. Now the latest version is the Leaf that you see people cruising around in. The ultimate opportunity is really, I mean, this is the ultimate disruption of using design to frame your problems, and it's thinking completely blue sky, out of the box. What could we possibly do? People are going to tell us this is crazy and impossible, but we're going to try and make it happen anyway. And it involves, you know, having courage and taking risk. So it's people who are in startups who often have the ability to do this, or companies that are in dire trouble, that are going, oh my gosh, if we don't do something drastic, we're in big trouble. And I think a good example of this back in the day was Nintendo. I mean, they were in crisis mode, and it allowed them to come up with the genius idea of the Wii. I mean, can you imagine when somebody first mentioned this idea years ago in the boardroom? Someone probably said, you are crazy, that cannot be done. I mean, it was revolutionary when it came out. And now you see products follow on like the Kinect, who take that idea and make it even that much better. So this really gives you a sense of the possibilities of design, and ideally you want to be doing all of these things. And too often, particularly with small companies, they just start at the bottom and say, I'm just going to go for style, I'm just going to make it look good. But you really need to be thinking throughout the whole cycle, and again, particularly for entrepreneurs, you have the ability to think big and think, you know, what are some of the crazy things I could possibly do? So has anybody heard of Robert Bruner? He runs a design agency called Ammunition in San Francisco, and he wrote this book, maybe it was 5-6 years ago. I really highly recommend it. It's very consumable. It's not written for designers. It's written for people to understand the importance of design and why you really need to focus on it in your business. So I'm going to play a little video from Robert.
Most people tend to think of design as this thing that information goes in and stuff comes out of, and then it's done. But when you look at the really great things that happen, it takes a lot more than that. It takes a very broad partnership across virtually all aspects of the company that have anything to do with delivering something. And so what I mean by it takes a village is everyone has to be signed up to what needs to happen. And another way I describe it is that everybody is a designer. You know, everyone in the room is a designer to some degree, because ultimately, you know, the engineer, the person on the line in manufacturing, the person providing support, all need to be cognizant of what the design story was or is, and how they're going to play a role in developing and implementing that. I mean, you can make one great thing, one great application, one great experience, you know, prototype it by yourself, but to deliver it out to the world in mass, it takes a whole group of people aligned. I was asked to do a packaging strategy for Dell by a good friend who was the general manager, and his idea was just make our packaging look better. You know, the first question was, why is it so bad? You know, no reason it should be so bad. So as we dove into it, we found that all these groups along the way were contributing things into the box, and there was no shared strategy, no shared idea about what a good packaging experience was. Most of the people along the chain were not, design was not part of their criteria, and in the end, the individual deciding what goes in the box was driven entirely by cost. So, you know, ultimately, there's no way they could do a good experience. So no matter how good of a box concept I created, it would have been destroyed by the system. What's great to me in the case of Citrix is you see CEO Mark Templeton embodying this idea of design being an important part of what Citrix does, and making it a clear objective for the company to become more design driven. And then that's where that leadership starts, is that the individual at the top is making a message that this stuff is important and we have to pay attention to it, and we're going to learn how to get better at it and start to drive it into our applications and drive it into our services. So we are, in fact, creating the best experience possible for people. You hear this a lot, that you're working on something that's enterprise-oriented, that somehow design doesn't matter, right? That somehow it's not as important as it might be in a more consumer-centric application. And I usually say that's complete BS, because what ultimately matters is you have people at the end of the experience, right? And I don't care who you are. When you start working with something, you develop those ideas and feelings about it. You know, you have a reaction to what you're working with, whether it's a sophisticated piece of software for your job, or whether it's the menu system on your cable at home. You know, you're feeling an experience. So it's really important that you're very clear about building a great experience based on that in application. And always remember, there's a human being sitting in front of it.
So I think he does a really nice job of articulating a couple of things. One, that everybody's a designer. It's not just the people who are using Photoshop day in and day out. We all need to adopt that mindset about the users and their needs and how we can create a really great experience for them. And I think that's one of the most important things to take away from that. The second one is that it's not just about consumers. It's also about admins, that everybody is really looking for a great experience. All right, so this is the way we talk about it at Citrix, because too often people think design is right here, that it's just a moment in time. Well, that's what the design team does, and we say no way. It's really about creating this total customer experience. It's about every single touch point your customer has should be a great one, whether it's you're pitching them in a sales meeting, or they're going to your website to learn about the product, they're downloading, they're using a trial, they're playing with it, or you know, they're ultimately deciding to invest. Or they have to call tech support because they're running into problems. Every single one of those touch points reflects your company, and you want to strive to create a great experience across the board. And we even talk about internally. Everybody has a customer. So the systems that we deploy internally, you know, a lot of the work I'm doing now, it's with HR or finance or IT, saying, guys, there's got to be a better way. The way we do expense reports right now, this is absurd. We can create a better experience for our internal customers. So these are some of the brands that are doing it well. You know, I don't think any of these are perfect, but they really do focus on the customer experience, not just that product. You know, it's about the product, the service, about every interaction touch point. One of the ones that's really resonated well at my company is Virgin America. So we have a big office here in Santa Clara. We have another large office in Fort Lauderdale. And I guess it was about 2 years ago, finally, a direct flight came in from San Francisco to Fort Lauderdale, and it was Virgin America. They were the first players to come in. And everybody was flying this airline and going, wow, this is different. This is better. When I check in, the people are nice. There's this beautiful white counter. It has a flower on it. I get my boarding pass. It's a nice little small card. The airline's got this cool, funky purple lighting. There's this interaction. I can get stuff whenever I want it. Every little aspect of the experience is well thought through, and people noticed it, and it stands out. And suddenly, even if it's more expensive for personal travel, people are choosing this airline over a United or over many of the other carriers because they recognize that they've done something really well here. So I think this is a good example of a company that's striving to create that great customer experience. And, you know, if it was easy, everybody would do it. It's not easy. It requires dedication from day one, and that's what's so great about people who are starting a business. You can make this core to your culture from day one. One of the startups that we acquired, their mantra was simpler is better, and they had that from day one. And 12 years later, they still say simpler is better, simpler is better. So finding some little thing that you can glean onto that focuses back to the customer and making that core is a really key thing. It's much harder, like a lot of our enterprise products, to be now 20 years later trying to turn the ship. So, you know, learn and make this part of your brand early on. So how do you make this part of your brand? How do you focus on design early on? So I'm going to talk a little bit about principles, process, and people, and hopefully there'll be some good takeaways for you here at the end of the day. So let's talk a little bit about principles first. But before I do, everybody just take a moment. I'm going to give you about a couple minutes here to think about some of the products or services you love. So just think of one or two, and then jot down next to it, or think about why do you love them? What makes you love these products or services? So just take a moment. If you don't have pen or paper, there's a stack over here. But just take a moment to write down the names of these products or services and why you love them. Okay, who would like to share their product or service? Do I have a volunteer?
So the product I love is Dropbox.
Ah, okay, why?
And why is because there's no questions asked.
No questions asked. It
just does the job.
It just does the job. Love it. Great example. Who else? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just even having an example when I had, because I thought about it a lot, and many people have tried to solve it before.
Mm-hmm.
When you have many devices, eventually a file is going to collide with another file. There's going to be like, you don't know which version is the latest. And I was like, how does it deal with that? And then I just realized it renamed both the files with dates. So it didn't even say anything about it. So I could just look at both the files and delete the one that was, the one I didn't want. So
I agree, because one of the most painful things used to be conflict resolution. Suddenly this dialog box would pop up and you need to make all these decisions, and it's
at the
seamless.
time I didn't want to take that decision.
Right. Great example. You had an example over here?
Oh, yeah. So this is probably people are taking for granted right now on the Gmail account.
Gmail account?
I just had my Gmail account. I was really fascinated and I'm very grateful because I'm a hoarder. So I always hoard my emails because I want to track down how people are responsible for their replies to me. Whereas the regular emails, it's very hard to track down which email I received, which one I replied.
So it's easier to track it down?
Exactly. So they collect all the response in one thread, and just right there.
Yep. Very cool.
Easily.
Who else? Let's take maybe a couple more.
This isn't as much of a product or service, but it's an experience. I love going into the Apple Store because they make it so easy to spend money there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like you walk in and I guess the best way to describe the emotional feel I feel like I'm sort of floating on air. And you're not trying to sell me anything.
Yeah.
When it comes time to look at something and make a decision whether you're going to buy it, you don't even realize you're doing it. By the time you're done with it, you didn't realize you spent the money, and they don't make you feel like that at all. You just walk out there feeling incredibly good about it.
Yeah, you suddenly feel cool and hip when you're in that store. You're like, yeah, I'm with it. This is a cool place to be. One more example?
Sure. Yeah, it's kind of cheating. I work here, but I have two eyes, and one of them is Instagram, and the other one is Now. And I love them both very dearly.
Two different things. Do tell.
Reasons, but the simplification part of it definitely comes back into it for sure. So Instagram allows me to, well, as the millions of people that use it know, it allows you to feel like a fantastic photographer very quickly and share amongst many social networks easily. And then Out just has great ingredients. And I've only been on the West Coast for 4 years, but now I understand. Like all the people I meet from LA that I was talking about, I get it. It's really good.
Cool. So some great examples, and you want to sit back and think about these things. What are the products that you love and why? And you kind of write down the principles that are important. What stands out to you? What makes a really good product in your mind? And this was one of the core things when I joined Citrix. We needed to figure out what were some principles that we could all rally around in terms of creating great products. What was going to be important to us in our space? So really even thinking about your own personal experiences can be very valuable as you think about your own product that you're developing. So these are the ones that we focus on. We created these 3 years ago. They're not rocket science, but we wanted to pick a small set of things that were very memorable for everybody and that anybody could digest and understand. So make it simple. A lot of the examples we heard you call out were about simplicity. It makes my life easier. It's easy to use. It just works. Craftsmanship. I'll talk a little bit about this, but it's really attention to detail. detail. I mean, that is what truly will create a great experience. Human goals, so the people who are going to be using your product and the experience they desire. Delight and delivering unique value. So let's talk a little bit about each of these. So simplicity, again, this should be, I would argue this should almost be on everybody's list. And simplicity is hard. It's much easier to make a really complicated product. It's much easier to say we've got to have this one more feature, oh, 2 more ads, customer XYZ needs this. And it's okay to start out with a lot, but it takes a lot of discipline to peel things away. And back to the point of MVP, what is the minimum? What are the bare minimum? What's the bare minimum? And you're much better off starting with that, a smaller set of features and functions, and really knocking them out of the park and creating a compelling experience than having too much stuff, too much clutter, and suddenly people don't even understand your product. So especially in the early stages, keeping it simple is critical. So this is a big challenge for us, GoToMeeting our product. And you know, one of the things I would always hear people say is, oh, I love GoToMeeting, and the next thing they would follow it with is it's so much easier to use than WebEx. And that was really the core of this product. It was how to make something simple and easy, how to easily start up a meeting. And as we have gotten bigger and have more functions and more capabilities, we're on more operating systems, it's hard to maintain simplicity. It really, really is. Particularly, you know, we start to add video capabilities. Suddenly we've got more controls and more widgets. So it's something you want to start out with early, but then let me tell you, it's a struggle. It's a struggle to keep things easy. So delight, I think this is something that's really, really key, and particularly the enterprise space is too often forgotten. And some people may say, well, what does delight mean in the enterprise space? Well, it's getting something done quickly, being really efficient, you know, that feeling of, wow, that was easy, you know, giving someone that feeling when they have to do an expense report or book travel, something they think is going to be really painful, and you can delight them. That's a really, really good thing. In the consumer space, it's making people go, this is cool. This is engaging. I want to continue to use this product. A great example of delight that I had just the other day, someone sent me a book via Amazon, a Kindle book, and I thought, oh, fantastic, I'm going to go in and get it, I download it, I try to send it to my iPad, and it didn't go there. And I go back into Amazon, and it says, sorry, you know, the gift has already been redeemed. And I'm like, oh, I'm stuck. So I go in and look for the help link. I'm already cranky because I hate having to deal with support issues, and I find a chat window and I say, all right, I'm gonna you know, type in my problem, and suddenly someone pops up right away and says, hey, how can I help you? I write in one line what my problem is. I'm not kidding. 30 seconds later he's like, it's fixed. Anything else I can do? Whoa, I wasn't expecting that. That was really delightful. You solved my problem, super helpful. How else can I help you? And I said, well, actually, it looks like I sent it to the wrong iPad. That was the problem. I don't have that one anymore. Can you remove it? Done. No problem. So, you know, there are really ways you wouldn't think of that you can delight your customers. So it's about, you know, sometimes taking something that's often painful and making it really easy for people. Craftsmanship. So this is something that's so important from a design perspective, and often it really is forgotten or gets dropped off the list. Or sometimes people, they think, well, what does it matter if the button's in the upper right or the upper left? You know, why does it need to be 3 pixels over? That's part of craftsmanship, and it's important to get those details right, because it really does set that first impression. When people look at your product, if it looks sloppy, if it doesn't look like you've invested time, they think, well, what's the quality of this product going to be? You know, they didn't even, there's spelling mistakes in here. Am I actually going to trust this product? You know, here's an example of a website that is actually out there now. I mean, are you going to lease a car from this guy? I mean, if you do, you've got more trust than I do. I would not do anything on this website. I would run terrified. You know, I'd probably go to something that looks more like this. It looks trustworthy. It looks like it's a place where I could go and lease a car and get what I expected. So you really need to think about the craftsmanship and that first impression that it can set. But craftsmanship is not just about the first experience, it's also about the total experience. If I think of an example of a company that is great about crafting an entire experience, it's Disney. Every sight, smell, interaction, music, everything that happens to you there is crafted. When Mickey shows up, where, it is all crafted. They have really laid out every single thing, and it's incredibly well orchestrated. So that's the example of the total, extreme, well-crafted experience. Deliver unique value. I mean, this is critical. If you're not going to be delivering value to your customers, what's the point? And this is really important for companies that have been around for a while, because you can get stuck in the trap of incrementalism, where you're just adding one more feature, one more feature, one more feature, one more feature, and that's not enough. If you keep doing that, the competition is going to blow past you. You may need to keep the lights on and keep those products going, but you need to figure out what's the next great thing. What's the new cool opportunity that I can offer my customers? So really important thing to think about. And a lot of times it's things that people think couldn't be redesigned or can't have the opportunity to be improved. This is a Nest thermostat. I don't know if anybody's seen it, but super slick, really cool, compelling design. And it's funny, they've kind of gone back to the old school, actually turn the dial. And it's a smart thermostat. It looks at your behaviors and what you do and how you use the thermostat to derive how it should work moving forward. So a really cool example of breakthrough innovation. So this one I want to spend a little bit of time on, and it's great because you guys were actually out there talking to customers last week. And it's interesting because sometimes your customer is your user. In a lot of cases they're not. So in my world, completely not. The person who is in our executive briefing center looking at demos is often the CIO or the person who runs IT, and they're not the main body of users. They're deploying stuff to the masses. So you need to make sure you're talking to your users and understanding what their needs are and what they want. Absolutely, you need to make the buyer happy and capture them as well, but you've got to, in order to get a product that's going to be sticky and people are going to use and love, you've got to get to the end users. So you really need to walk in their shoes. You need to understand their world. You need to understand their experience and what's working well and what's not working well. A lot of companies do this well in that they make sure their companies are using their products. So Ritz-Carlton, everyone mandatory is required to stay at Ritz-Carlton properties and report back on that experience. How was the customer experience? How were we doing? And it gives them really good data points. And that's a great thing to do. At Citrix, we drink the champagne or eat the dog food, however people like to refer to it in their company. But it's really important to use your products day in and day out. But the thing is, you can't just rely on your opinion. I think of us at Citrix, we're all tech geeks. We're all nerds. You can't rely on us. We don't reflect the average HR clerk or someone in procurement who may work in front of a computer 8 hours a day and then goes home and is they're hanging out with their kids or they're watching TV. They don't live and breathe technology like we do. So you need to be very careful in just relying on your own opinion. It's a great starting point, but you need to talk to the customers. And even Steve Jobs, people say, oh, Apple, they never talk to customers, they never, they don't do focus groups, they don't do those kinds of things which can give you bad data, but they absolutely, they understanding the customer's world, understanding the interactions, it's a great place to look for opportunity. This is one thing I really like. It came from the Apple Marketing Handbook from 1977, and the top line in their philosophy is empathy. We will truly understand their needs better than any other company. This is key, because if you understand their needs, then you know where there's opportunity. So I want to play another quick video which highlights how lack of empathy for your products, for your customers, your users, can send you completely down the wrong path. So let's jump to that.
10 years ago, in the late 90s, Microsoft faced a threat that they had never seen before. You see, they had spent the last 20 years looking to find ways to dominate the personal computer, and they had basically pummeled the heck out of guys like Netscape and IBM and Apple and really dominated their space. And then they woke up one day and realized that they were about to become irrelevant. And the thing that was going to make them irrelevant was this thing right here. You see, in the fall of 2000, Sony was getting set to launch the PlayStation 2. Show of hands, how many of you have a PlayStation 2? Yes, you see, this frightens Microsoft tremendously, right? So they decided to do something completely different. They went out and hired a group of people who loved to play video games. It turns out that Microsoft also knew nothing about gaming. They knew everything about what people did in their offices, like what we do when we go back to our cubicles. But they knew nothing about what people did in their homes and how they spent time in their living rooms. So they got together a group of folks who loved to play video games. And I mean loved to play video games. These guys, they were 35 years old going on 13, and they loved to spend time killing things and fighting each other. More than anything else, they just love to kick ass, right? So when they made a video game console, they made something that was for them. Right? This was not going to be some PlayStation thing where you could wander through a magical fairyland and pick up fancy jewels and rescue the fairy princess with your buddy Mario. This was going to be something that you could use to kill people. Okay? And it had a very focused and directed message about what it was all about. And what they did was they made a game console that was for themselves. And they named it the Xbox. And when they launched it in the fall of 2001, it was an overnight sensation. They launched it with a game called Halo, which went on to become an iconic video game brand beyond anything that had been seen on the computer before. They sold 24 million units worldwide. iPod was launched in the fall of 2001 and it immediately took off. They sold 50 million iPods by 2006. It was a huge success. And they said, we can go after this too. So they took that same team, the same managers, the same developers, the same designers, and they said, now we want you to go after this thing. Now we want you to destroy this. And so very quickly the team worked and they launched something called Zune. How many of you have a Zune? Show of hands. Anybody? They sold 2 million Zunes in the first 18 months. At that same time, 84 million iPods were sold. It's just an unfortunate thing. One reviewer, when describing the installation process of the Zune, said it was about as pleasurable as having an airbag launch in your face. Just a nasty product. And looking at this was something that we at Jump were fascinated by. Because here was the same team, the same company, the same time schedule, the same competitive situation, where in one situation they had dramatically transformed the market and did something amazing, and in the other they did something amazingly poorly. And we wanted to figure out what that difference was. And we spent time up in Redmond, Washington, and we talked to the folks who worked on this, and over we heard the same story, and it came down to one thing, one driving difference between Xbox and Zune that made one the all-time killer and one the all-time flop. And it came down to who they were designing it for. We heard over and over people saying things like, the biggest challenge with Zune was trying to figure out who we were building it for. With Xbox, we knew those guys. Hell, we were those guys. And with Zune, we didn't know what we were doing. But what we're finding is that over and over again, the number one differentiator in the mix is that sense of empathy. And by empathy, I don't mean lovey-doveyness, and I don't mean touchy-feeliness. What I mean by empathy is the ability that every one of us has, that every one of us is wired with from the day we're born, which is the ability to step outside of ourselves and put ourselves in someone else's shoes. And if you can do that, you pick up on a lot of information that you otherwise didn't know. And that's what it means for an individual. For a company, it means stepping outside of your company. It means stepping outside of your building and stepping out into the world and bringing that outside world into you so that you have an intuitive understanding of what's going on in the world. Right? Because when we spend time with clients, we notice that there are some companies that we work with that do incredibly well very quickly. And there are some companies that struggle. And the ones that do incredibly well have that innate sense of empathy. When you walk into Harley-Davidson, the sign at the front of the building says,
So really nice case study of the importance of understanding your users. So empathy is key, and really understanding our customers and our users provides a lot of value. It can help us make very informed decisions. It can help us understand what we want to build and really prioritize. And it's key because otherwise you're going to make misinformed calls. And at the end of the day, it's very much an art rather than a science. But it's something that is absolutely critical to success. And it really allows you to create those disruptive products. So again, we really need to hear from those who are truly the customers, not the people who are buying, or you're buying it for your aunt or your cousin or you're the CIO. You got to get to the users. The users may be 6-year-old kids. You got to go talk to those people. You really need to understand who's going to use your product at the end of the day. I really like this Dilbert because at the end of the day, it's not just about saying, hey, Jane, what do you want the product to do? That's where you're going to get bad data. People will give you weird answers that are going to send you in the wrong direction. So it's not just about asking, It's very much about going out and observing. You know, going out in the field where your users would actually use the product and spending time with them. And it's not necessarily always about probing and interviewing. Sometimes it's just going out and watching. You know, if you're going to buy something that's going to live in the retail space, you know, you go and you watch people as they look at these products and they're making decisions. What are they doing? You may try and intercept them at the end to ask questions, but it's going out and following them. We launched a product on iPad about a year ago, and it was being heavily used in the healthcare field. And it was great. We had the opportunity to go out and shadow doctors and nurses who were using this and just quietly wander and watch them and not interrupt them, but really understand when they were using the product, when they weren't using the product, and getting an understanding of the context of where the product was being used. These days, especially because we're all multitasking, you know, there are devices going on, there's something distracting over here, things are often used intermingled with other interactions. So getting a sense of the context of use and the other things that are happening around is really, really key. So again, you know, if you ask people what they do, they will often, it's not that they're being malicious and they're trying to lie, it's just they truly don't think of some of the things to tell you that may be real gems because they don't think it's important, or they don't really realize that they do that. I remember when I was at Salesforce, I went out to a customer site and I was talking to a manager, because sometimes you do interviews before you go sit and watch with people, and I was talking with the manager about how escalations work, and you know, he gave me the process and how they're using XYZ, and they built these components. And then I went and sat with the support agents and watched how escalations worked. They worked in that the person would put a red post-it on their boss's monitor that said, "Call Sue immediately, like level 2 crisis." I'm like, wow, nobody told me this is how escalations were done. People want to tell you how things are done by the book. So you got to get out and watch and see what's going on. So best practices are go out, you know, if you've got 45 minutes to an hour to spend with people, really watch them in their environment. And in some cases you want to go watch them in a variety of contexts and see what's going on and what's happening. And then afterwards, that's where you may want to spend some time and say, all right, I want to talk to you now. This is all the stuff I saw. You know, let's talk a little bit about some of these things and give me some insights. It's about looking at the big picture, as I was saying. You know, where does your product fit into the customer's world? Mayo Clinic is someone that does a really great example of, again, embodying this total customer experience and making sure data is passing along, and the customer, who they refer to them as, the patient, is not treated like a number, and their information is transferring from place to place. So it's a very fascinating place to go and watch and see customer interactions and how they've really nailed it, based on watching customers and patient experiences and how they were really poor in the past. So we're going to do a little exercise here. Given that it's tax season, who's done their taxes so far? Oh, about 30%. I'm in the have not done it bucket. It's on everybody's dread list. But this is what we're going to do. You're going to pair up with somebody. You're going to interview your partner for about 45 minutes, and you're going to ask them about their tax filing journey. So because a lot of you haven't done it yet, it will be what's going through your mind now, what do you normally do, how have you done this in the past, and then we're going to switch. Now again, this isn't ideal. If I really want to do this, I would go to your house and I'd want to say, all right, I'm coming to you before you do your taxes, and tell me a little about what you're thinking, what's on your mind. You'd show me some stuff, you'd show me where your W-2s are, and then I want to come over when you actually do your taxes and watch you. But for our purposes here, we're going to talk a little bit about it with one another. And the key thing is there's some things that I think from the interview and discussion perspective that you can get out of this. So you switch, and then I want you to spend 5 minutes about insights that maybe you would have gained had you not spoken to this other person about tax preparation that maybe you wouldn't have learned. So before we jump in and do this, some food for thought. So these are some of the things when you're going out and talking to people or observing them, or after the fact you've done a bunch of watching, now you want to talk to them. You want to find out what starts their journey, like what got them down on this path, what was the thing that kicked them off, what are the other things around the way, what are the tasks involved in this. If taxes is at first I get my W-2s, and I got to go online and get stuff from Fidelity. You know, what are the things that happen? What are the key events? Why do you do those events? Why are these things that are important? What's going on, and what are you thinking about? Why do you have to go to your mother-in-law's to do that? That doesn't make sense to me. Tell me more. And how do they feel along the journey? I mean, this is a great place where you can find opportunity. When people are really happy about something, you want to make sure that your product doesn't interfere with them being happy at that point. If they're really unhappy with something, that's a huge opportunity. Oh, wow, this is a really difficult thing. How can I make this much easier for people? And at the end of the day, these are some of the key things that you want to glean if you've done observation and then an interview. You want to come away and understand how people think about their data, how they think about their processes, the steps they take, and who's involved. Often, you know, it's not just one person. There can be many people who are engaged in the process as they go along. So what are those handoffs or transitions that happen? What makes them crazy? How can I make things better for them? How skilled are they, and what are their real goals? So this technique of going out and observing and interviewing is great for existing products. So I go out all the time, and I go to watch people using our products and really understand how they're using them today, what they are using, what they're not using. But it's also great for looking for product opportunities. I know I want to do something in this tax area. I know it's really painful for people. You know, there are things like Intuit, but it's still painful. It could be so much easier. You know, a great example, I was talking to one of my friends the other day, and I was over at her place, and we were talking about taxes, and she was like, she's got a couple kids. She's like, it's just such a hassle. I don't do them myself. It means I got to go see my tax guy. I got to collect all my stuff. I got to go down there. I got to find a sitter. You know, it's just such a hassle. Usually I don't have the right forms, that I got to go back to them again. And some of them I can send via email, but a lot of them I can't. And what a pain. And I thought, well, an interesting opportunity for her. You know, what would be great for her is something like Geek Squad, but Tax Squad. You know, she wants somebody to come to her house who's going to sit there. She can scramble and get what papers. They could be like, hey, Sue, I also need the W-2. Where you want to bring your laptop over here? I'll show you what you need. You know, could sit there and she could run around, watch the kids, and, you know, come over and interject as needed with this person. So by having this quick discussion and understanding her perspective on taxes and her pain, I thought, there's an interesting opportunity here. So this is really the key. By getting out, seeing people, what they do, and engaging with them, you can get these really great insights. And you get a sense of the journey. At the end of the day, you know, when you do these visits out with customers or users, you want to have a good sense of what their journey is. And the journey is not always going to be about your product or your idea, but then you can see, you know, where your product or idea inserts into their journey. So with that, find somebody next to you. You're going to take, I'll time you, you'll get 3 minutes, we'll say, in the interest of time, to interview them about their tax experience. So again, ask the questions of, you know, where are you? Have you done it? How are you feeling about it? A lot of it is getting to the emotion. What are you going to do next? What products are you going to use? And then we'll swap, and then I'll give you a couple more minutes and think about new insights that you gleaned based on this discussion. All right, so find a buddy and go. All right, so let's just jump in. So you had a chance to chat with folks. Somebody tell me an interesting insight that they gained based on their discussion with somebody. You know, it would be one thing if I sat here and said, I'm going to think about my tax perspective and what pains me, but it's probably very different than what pains a lot of you. So what are some interesting insights that you gained by having this discussion?
So Mikhail is from Sweden. So I actually asked him, like, what was his tax preparation. It's actually much more simplified than the US, where you have to scramble for your paperwork and stuff that you don't understand. In Sweden, you actually they have a simplified tax version where you just have to sign and send in the form, where they actually already do your tax and everything is filed in for you by the government itself. I think that was pretty cool. Like, we
all need to go to Sweden and figure out what they're doing right and we're doing wrong. Great, that's a great example. Who else has got an example of an interesting insight they uncovered? Back here?
So I was talking to Kieran here, and what was interesting was how he went about making the decision of which accountant he used. And what it really boiled down to for him is that he had a complex situation, and he got tired of interviewing 5 consultants. So the ultimate days, he came across a consultant who said, you know what, I don't know your situation, but I'll figure it out. But he already knew from his experience was, okay, well, I'm only going to have to check 4 or 5 things that she does because I know those are the critical points. So I'll just use her to get through my process. I don't have to call 4 or 5 more consultants. But then, next year, then I'll basically delay the decision to try to find somebody who really knows my situation.
Nice. Yeah, and this is something interesting. Often you wouldn't think about that part of the journey of what's the criteria that somebody uses to actually choose someone to use to do their taxes, and whether they choose to use a person or a product. We got another one. Maybe someone wants to share.
Two things. One was that the accountant sending the sort of packet to Chris is a trigger to then take action, and then the accountant actually called to walk through the packet, actually sort of step by step. And so there's some sort of triggering there for the user to take action on getting things together that I wasn't thinking about. And I forgot the other one, but I have it written down. I'll skip it.
Okay, great. And how about one last one somebody would like to share? Right here.
Actually, one thing I was really impressed with Cynthia's accountant, he actually gives her a login and she can enter her information. Having my dad being a tax accountant, he enters that himself and clocks up his own time, whereas that seems pretty efficient for an accountant, so that's good for them.
That's a great one, getting some of the basic information, and that would essentially be administrative work, putting that on someone else. So it just shows the power of having these quick discussions that you may ultimately think, well, I'm the user, I'm going to build it for myself, but by going out and chatting with other people, observing their world, incredibly powerful insights will emerge, and that's really where you can get those cool disruptive ideas. So one thing that's really important is you need to think about all of your users. So you may be a lucky person where you're in the pure consumer world and the person who's going to buy it is the same person who's going to use it and there's no administration required. A good example is in my world. It is complicated. I've got a lot of users that I need to please. I need to please that CIO who's going to buy it. I need to please that administrator who's got to manage it and deploy it. And I've really got to delight that end user and create something that at the end of the day when the IT guy rolls it out, that she's going to be delighted and go, this product is awesome, and tell her friends. So you need to think about all those people and make sure you're appealing and creating a great experience for all of them, and that you're chatting with all of them. I can't just chat with the CIO, and this is the trap that a lot of people fall into. They just talk to the buyer because they think the buyer is the one with the money. I'm going to talk to them and I'm going to lure them in. But at the end of the day, if you don't make that end user happy, you've lost the game. You're not going to get your renewals. They're not going to come back for more products. So if you have multiple users, you need to think about how do I use this process for all of them. So really want you to go away and think about your own product, your own site, whatever it is that you're working on, and really think about these questions about who are your users and their journey, and go out and spend some time with them. Even if you don't have a product yet, go out with the people who potentially would be using your product and try and get a better understanding of their world. You're going to find it incredibly valuable, and you're going to gain a lot of really great insights. So I think this is one of the most important things in creating fantastic products. So now I'm going to touch on process quickly. We teach at Citrix a whole 2-day class on this, so I'm going to skim over at a very high level. And a lot of it's pretty familiar to you, and especially if you're a startup, you tend to be very agile, lots of people wearing multiple hats. But I'll talk a little bit about, we've got a formulated team. One of the most core things that we talk about all the time at Citrix is 3 in a box, and that's really making sure product management, product design, and product development are working together from day one. Another one of those traps that people often fall into is the handoff, that, well, product management is just going to go get requirements and then they're going to throw them to the designer, and the designer is going to create this design and then throw it to the engineer. It just doesn't work. Everybody needs to be working together collaboratively from day one, because you need to create a product that's desirable, that's feasible, that's viable, and you have to have those conversations together and work out those issues real time. Then rather, I get together with the PM, we come up with this awesome, cool idea, create this design, and the engineer goes, we can't do that. We don't have enough time, or it's the wrong technology. You've just wasted a lot of time and energy. So you really need to make sure all those parties are in the room together. This is the process that we tend to follow, and I think even if you're a startup, it's the same kind of thing. It may be more condensed. Your cycles might be a lot faster, which is great. But you really want to focus on discovery, and a lot of what we were just doing in that last exercise is the discovery, and a lot of what you were doing the week before, going out and trying to find out what the MVP is and talking to those buyers, that's discovery. So you want to spend time there. Then you move on to conceptual design, and this is where you can really blue sky and prototype and think about, now that I have all this data, what are the possibilities? What could I do with this? What kind of product could we create? And once you get a little bit more of a narrow scope, then you go to detailed design, then you move on to implementation and post-ship. So let's talk a little bit about these. At the end of the discovery phase, where we've got all that rich customer data and user data, we like to create personas, and these come in a variety of shapes and format, but it's essentially just writing a summary of who is our user, who is our core user, because if you can't nail that, you're going to have a big problem. Just like that example with Zune. They didn't know who they were designing for, and if you can't figure that out, you're not possibly going to be able to meet the needs of these people. So then conceptual design. I mean, this is the fun part. This is where you get to come back and go wild and crazy. And too often people want to drive to a solution. They want to get to that end point. What are we doing here? What are we going to build? What do we want to do? Don't do that. We encourage you to go broad. Think crazy, blue sky, and then that will ultimately allow you to go narrow. And you pick off some of those ones that are impossible and can't be done, and you arrive at the right place. But if you start with all the constraints, you're really going to limit those great ideas. So you want to start big, and we do tons of prototyping and sketching. This is where you want to have those raw tools. Even if you are a startup, the temptation is to go right to code. Start with paper. I mean, we spend so much time at the whiteboard with stickies before we even write a single line of code, and you really think this is key no matter how big your company is. Another big thing is the type of workplace. You know, you want a place that is collaborative, where people are working together, where they can sit around and have a place where they can sketch out ideas. I mean, the biggest tool, some of the most important tools in our toolkit are Post-its and whiteboard markers and whiteboards. And we get everybody, again, going back to PM, engineering, and design, we get all three people, you know, in the room around that whiteboard, because design is not just my responsibility, it's everybody. And I put a whiteboard marker in everybody's hands and say, let's sketch this out. And sometimes, you know, engineers are like, oh, I don't sketch. But once you start going, people get really comfortable. And when you're in the environment that you've got all the right tools, and you don't need to go up to the front of the room to draw something, that the whiteboard is all around you, people suddenly get into the mode of being creative and sketching out ideas. In the Citrix building just down the street on Great America, we built out this fantastic collaboration spaces. These are shots of it here. And it's this big space around the size of this room. Everything is on wheels, high tables with stools, because it's a very active room. It's not about sitting back and lounging. Everybody is in there doing work. It's non-bookable because it's about spontaneous collaboration. Teams have little areas that they'll go and do daily stand-ups every day and come out. And it's really very, very conducive to a variety of different work styles. And it's the nature of it is it's not about computers and digital. It's about analog. It's about paper. It's about sketching. So when people come into this room, their mind immediately goes into a different gear. It's like, this is the place where I can discover. This is the place where I can be creative. And another cool thing is they see all the other work on the walls. They see what other teams are doing. They get inspired by that. So, you know, having the right tools for people is really important. I mean, it's even the small stuff. I mean, how often did it used to be that I go into a conference room, I go to write on the whiteboard, none of the whiteboard markers worked. So even just having, you know, a stack of whiteboard markers, a stack of Post-its, allows people to do this creative thinking. Again, you know, this is how we like to think early on. It's messy, it's crazy, it feels uncomfortable, it feels chaotic, but that's okay. It'll help you arrive at the right decision. And then you want to get, you know, all right, we've gone wide, now we need to get a little bit more serious. What are we actually trying to build here? What do we want to do? And that's often where you want to create prototypes or things that are a little bit more realistic to what you want to do. You've nailed down that idea, but what's the behavior? How is it going to work? What are the words? What's the language we want to use in the product? That's something very key that people often overlook. The controls, the widgets, you need to get to that more detailed level of design at this stage. And this is sometimes where people struggle because they go, I'm not good at this. And this is often where you do want someone who's got an interaction design background or a visual design background to help you out at this phase. But everybody absolutely can contribute to this. It's sometimes just getting it down on paper that it can be tricky for some folks. But these are all the things that you need to be thinking about this early on. And then my key philosophy, I'm a big believer in fail fast, fail early, lots of ideas. So it's about iterate until awesome. And this can be exhausting. You know, I had a meeting the other day and I turned to the guy who was the design lead and I said, just as I was about to give up hope, because we had been trying to tackle this design problem for 4 weeks, and we had done, I can't tell you how many iterations, and we just weren't getting it. And you're just so tired and you're about to go, you know, forget it, I give up, we're going to have to go with this solution. And then you get this breakthrough and we were like, aha, we nailed it, we finally got it. So don't give up, keep iterating, and don't compromise. Don't let it be okay. You want to get to awesome. So keep generating those ideas. And a lot of ways you can do that is showing your ideas to your peer, going back to those users, showing them some of your ideas. We do this all the time with paper and Post-its and say, you know, what would you do here? What do you think about this? Getting that feedback early can help you get to the right design. So one of the things we do in our classes, we don't have the time to do it here this evening, is we'll get people to do these kinds of design exercises, and they go, oh my gosh, this is actually really hard. Doing design well, it takes time. It does. It is an investment, and you know, you're dying to just jump to code, but you want to think the problem through, and you want to make sure you've tackled it and you've got the right solution. So doing these kinds of exercises for people can be a great warm-up and appreciation for this is something that actually is tricky. And we do them, we get all these kinds of fun sketches that people would do, and then we get them to vet them with their partner, and they think it's fantastic, and suddenly the person next to them starts ripping it apart because they don't get it, they don't understand it. And one of the important things when you're vetting your designs is to not view it as somebody telling you your baby is ugly. You know, you have to be open to feedback. You have to be open to criticism, because that is ultimately going to help you create the better product. People's initial intention or initial reaction is to be defensive. No, well, we do it but this way because, and don't do that. Don't do that. Listen to what people have to say and understand why they feel it doesn't make sense to them or it's not usable. Defending a bad design is not going to get you anywhere. So then we move on to detailed design, and if you're in a place where you've got some really great front-end developers, what you'd love to do is hand off an interactive prototype that can be coded, or you can jump right to code at that place and start to work. If you're a startup, you know, often the designer is the coder. You know, it's you'll have people wearing multiple hats. And this is an unfortunate situation I hate to find myself in, which is when I need to do these very detailed design specs, where you need to call out every single thing in a flat file and say what every single thing on the page is supposed to do. This is really painful. We often have to do this if we don't have someone who can do an interactive prototype, or if we need something to go overseas, and you know that sometimes there can be things that get lost in translation, and you need to be very, very explicit. But the best thing I recommend when you are at that phase of handing something to the person who's going to code it, if those roles are different, is to have an interactive prototype. And then when your engineer is going to implement the idea, it's really key to go back to your prototypes, to go back to your specs, and make sure that it's being implemented correctly. At the end of the day, when you get to this phase, and it's in the final weeks, you're trying to put the polish on, you always need to make trade-offs. There's going to be that one thing that can't be done, or it's not working, or you can't fix it. You want to make sure when you're making those trade-offs that you don't strip away so many things that you really compromise the experience. You need to ask with every one of those changes, okay, I recognize I have to make a change here, but what's the way I can do it without really compromising the user experience? So make sure you focus on that. I mean, I've been in these unfortunate situations where we have this beautiful, fabulous design, it's been vetted with customers, they love it, and then what's built at the end of the day is this three-headed monster, and you'll go, what happened here? And you just make so many trade-offs in that phase that it's not the same product at all anymore. So this is an area to be really, really careful. And then then you ship it. You get the product out the door. You get the beta or the V1, and you don't want to just pat yourself on the back and move on. You want to go back out and talk to those users. You do that same cycle again. You go out and see the people who are using the product. You observe them. You understand what's going on and what could be better. And yeah, you want to celebrate. It's great that you've got it out there, but immediately start to think, what could I do better? What are the new opportunities? If you did a good job of paring down those features in the product and really focusing on simplicity, there are definitely going to be new things that they're asking for and demanding. So you want to understand what those are, and you can get that by going out and observing and watching. So the last thing I'll touch on is people. So if you're going, oh boy, okay, I get this is important, but I don't really know how to do this. I can't tackle this. How do I get this skill set on my team or as part of my company? Lots of things to think about here. I mentioned everybody is a designer, and design is something that everyone needs to think about. But this is the hard stuff. It's doing all of these things and getting the right layout and getting something super slick that sometimes people they don't have the skills to do. Some people are great at it, other people are not. So you may come to the conclusion, I need a designer. And if you do, these are some of the things that I'd leave you with that you really want to think about. There are a whole variety. It can be very challenging to navigate this area because people have all kinds of job titles and functions. There are researchers, there are interaction designers, there are visual designers, there are prototypers. So you want to figure out what are the things that are most important to you in your business and where you are at any point in time. And if you're a small company, you want to get somebody who's got a variety of these skills and has worked in a variety of these different areas. Someone who is a great communicator is key. They need to be able to articulate the design and why they've done it that way, who can bring a rationale to their design. If you ask why it's blue and why this is over here and why that's down there and why a flower, they should be able to answer those questions. If they can't, if they just go, I don't know, that's not someone you want to work with. Iterative, again, that really understands it's not just about doing one design and then walking away. It's about going through a bunch of different designs. And it may feel like churn, but it's iteration. It's key to the process. And lastly, no ego. You want somebody who doesn't want to do this design and not hear feedback or take input, that they're willing, they are desiring feedback from customers and want to figure out how to make it better. Portfolio is truly one of the best ways, the best gauges when you're looking at people. If they don't have a portfolio, immediately you don't want to bring that person on board, whether as a contractor or full-time. And looking at somebody's portfolio, it gives you a chance to see the kind of work that they've done, see their interaction, see their visual style. See, is this someone that you think you would want to work with? How do they communicate? Really, really key. This example of two very, very different portfolios. So something that is an absolute must. It's almost in a lot of ways more important than even speaking to the person. Question?
Sorry, can you wrap what you're saying around how to go about finding the right designer? I mean, I feel like I've done a fairly decent job, but I feel like it was a difficult process in the whole thing based on how tight the market is.
Yes. Oh, it is ridiculously.
This problem of getting somebody to help you.
Yeah, it's.
Can you repeat the question?
It's ridiculously competitive. So the question was, how do you actually go about finding that right person? Especially, it's a very competitive market right now. So the first place I would say is knowing where to go. A lot of these really great sites that you can go and check out people, check out portfolios that are online, post jobs that you're looking for. Another thing is really knowing how to pitch your opportunity. I mean, that's one of the key things. It is the war for talent is crazy aggressive. So my challenge 3 years ago at Citrix, when a lot of people had never heard of us, how do I get super bright, talented people to come join Citrix as opposed to go to Google or Facebook or LinkedIn? I'm like, oh boy, I got a challenge here. And my big value proposition was, here's a chance to be a part of a startup, to join a company where the CEO has design as a strategic imperative, and to build something from the ground up. So that's what made really smart, talented people who would otherwise maybe go to a consumer company go, no, I want to be part of something over here. This sounds like a real opportunity to have a big impact. So as a startup, you want to think about, here's a chance to change the world. We're working on XYZ, be part of a revolution, be able to be a game changer, have an impact. I mean, so a lot of it is about how to pitch your idea. The second one is very much about finding the right talent. So it's looking at those portfolios and trying to find someone who's done work that's similar to you. So if mobile is your key thing, I wouldn't hire anybody who hasn't done work in mobile. So trying to find people who are going to be the right fit for you. If you feel, oh boy, I can't hire somebody full-time, I just can't invest in that, there are design agencies. The problem with design agencies is they're very expensive. If you've got good cash flow, then it's design in a box. You get them to come in for a period of time, they do some incredible work, and then they say, see you later. So that can work very well for your needs. Lots of fantastic agencies in the Bay Area. Contractors, lots of very, very good contractors out there who will do spot work. It's often can be a less expensive solution. They may be willing to work for you for a few hours a week. New grads, fantastic schools like Carnegie Mellon, wonderful programs in design. The iSchool over at Berkeley, fantastic program. You know, Stanford's got people coming out of the D school. So lots of people, even locally, who are grads, and interns. Lots of people who are very hungry. And some of these interns and new grads have fabulous portfolios, have worked on really cool things. So if you can nab them, really great opportunity. And especially new grads, they often want to go work for the startup. You know, your location and the product you're working on can be the cool, compelling thing for them. So think about how to pitch the idea, look at the portfolio, and go from there. I will leave you with some useful design articles that I think are very much relevant to your world and you would find useful. I'm happy to provide these slides for everybody after as well. Here's some additional good articles that you can check out. I won't make you write them all down. I'll make sure you get them available. But lots of really great resources out there about the basics. You know, what are some of the top 10 things that I can think about? I can't afford a designer, but I want to learn the basics. I want to get up to speed. There's good websites, there are good books that can give you kind of the essence of at least some of the things you need to start to think about. And it's interesting, when I did a talk here at the Startup Accelerator a few weeks back, it was someone from an enterprise group, and he just said, you know, I just can't afford to hire a designer. I'm doing admin consoles, and I just don't think it's worth my time. And before I could even jump in, you know, someone else who was from the Startup Accelerator said, no, you can't afford not to hire a designer, and told his story about, you know, the experience he'd had and all the trouble and how they failed because they didn't invest in design early on. So I just want to leave you with that message that it's something that is really core to the business. People are choosing applications, whether they're consumers or IT providers, based on the experience they deliver, and you just can't afford not to have a great experience in this market. So with that, if we have time, I'd love to open it up to any questions that folks might have.
Can I start off with a couple?
Sure.
I think I'll play talk show host. I wanted to. That was fantastic. So
good.
I wanted to dive in on this idea of unearthing insight from the observation studies, because I think that's oftentimes what separates the great startups from the good startups. Is that when you're doing those observations, the great ones pick up on things that the good ones don't. And this sort of goes back to that initial point that was made, where somebody was doing a customer development interview, and the customer didn't even realize that there was and this is your slide exactly, where the customer wasn't admitting something that was actually going to benefit them.
Right.
And the great guys seem to unearth that insight and just make that trade-off, where they focus on that and they create a simple design like the thermostat. And so it seems like the hallmark of it is trying to find that one key killer thing.
Completely agree.
So do you have any tactical feedback in terms of how the great designers or the great entrepreneurs take in that observation data and discover what to focus on versus what not to focus on?
I think a lot of people, when they go out in the field, they're going out and they've already got a solution in mind. They're already thinking, I'm going to solve X, Y, Z. And that can be okay. It can be in the back of your mind. But I encourage people to be so much broader. You know, you may know you want to do something in the area of making the tax experience easier, but go broader and look for the potential opportunities that may exist around that. You may come up with something completely different that you wouldn't have thought of and go, actually, that's the opportunity that I'm going after. You know, it's not creating an iPhone app, but it's actually working with the government to change change something on the form on that end. Who knows? But that's really the essence. I had an interesting experience when, again, we were out in the healthcare area watching people use iPads, and I thought this is a great opportunity that I've just uncovered. They're talking to other patients, they're actually showing things like x-rays and test results on the iPad. It's hard to hold, especially a lot of cases they've got to use gloves, and the iPad, it's just, there's no easy way to hold. It's slipping, the case isn't right. It's almost like they need like a little handle or something on the back of it. So, something that I never would have thought of, something that never came out of interviews, something that I was not looking to go solve. We were looking at the software, but a cool opportunity from a design perspective that I went, this is really opportunity for this particular use case. They need a better way to hold the tool. So definitely go out and think broad.
Okay, and it just has to sort of come to you, like that. Just sort of when you looked at that.
Yeah, right away you go, aha.
There's something inside where like,
yeah,
that's not right.
Mm-hmm.
And then what do you need to move things past to the next phase? So either from the observation phase, what's enough to say, aha, that's something that I want to move onto the conceptual phase of? Or when you're in the blue sky conceptual phase, what's the least amount of confirmation that you need to be able to dedicate resources and then to go towards the detailed stage?
I think that's where you've got to triangulate and use multiple sources, right? You start out blue sky, total blue sky, like wacky stuff. But then you want to, whoever's collecting the business requirements, can we make money on this? Can we actually build this? And once you factor in some of the constraints of the real world, that's going to narrow down your set and your pool of ideas. And by having the perspectives of engineering and the business, whether it's product management and design, that's really where you're going to come and go, okay, I think this is the area we can focus. We can create a really cool product that solves a compelling need, and we can actually build it and make money.
Okay. And then the last question, then I'm going to turn over to you guys. And then do you have the product manager be the main customer interface, or is the designer and the engineer also involved in the customer development interviews? And are they involved but not to the same extent as the product manager? Are they fully involved?
Fully involved. We have everybody fully involved.
So
and it may
many customer development interviews as the product manager.
Yeah, and we may rotate on a lot of them. I mean, that's the cool thing. When you've got this really tight relationship, you could often rotate. It's like, all right, you go to Salt Lake City, I'm going to go down to LA. And, we craft the plan of what we're going after together, but absolutely, you've got to have engineering out there with you feeling the pain or seeing the opportunity, as opposed to coming back and reporting and putting PowerPoint slides on the deck. It's not the same as being out there and experiencing it real time.
And so you even have the engineers out there in the initial blue sky customer development.
Oh yeah, totally.
They're as involved as the product manager.
Yeah, no, very much. And sometimes that scares people. They're like, no, you can't let them. It's like, no, yes, we can. They've got to come out. And they come back with some of the biggest aha moments. And some of the engineers over my career that have been the most difficult and challenging to work with, they'll have these one or two customer experiences, and it's like religion. They have this huge shift and go, oh my God, I see this in a different way. We need to create a better product. We do a lot of design workshops at Citrix, and I have to tell you, the number of aha moments we do when we go out and talk to customers, it's incredible. A lot of them come from the folks who don't normally talk to customers.
Okay, great. Questions?
Yeah, so my question was basically, you mentioned how simplicity is really important. So how do you take a feature-rich, mature product, simplify it, and kind of the context here is a lot of people are starting greenfield. They can basically make the product as simple as they want to. How do you compete with that, having this mature, kind of very feature-laden product?
I think that's where you can compete, because a lot of these very mature products with lots of features are complex. And if you can put out something new with a compelling idea that's sticky, you can get people to migrate over to using that. I mean, if you think about a great example, something like Microsoft Word. I mean, that used to be the standard of the way everybody took notes, or anything they did, they would open Word. Now you've got all these cool things like Evernote. People are going, no, this is the way I want to track my thoughts and my ideas. I'm not using Word anymore. It doesn't have nearly the functionality or capability. It's a smaller use case. I'm not going to write my thesis in Evernote, but I use it for a lot of the things that I probably would have used Microsoft for. So it's about finding that little niche, or if you're going to have a smaller feature set, it's finding that niche or that task set where you can do what an existing product is doing, but you can do it much, much better.
And given the example that you gave, GoToMeeting, does that ever does it worry you that someone will come along and basically make GoToMeeting that is 10 times simpler? And I guess
absolutely
what are some strategies that you guys have
to
counteract it? Because again, if it's a simpler product, the solution in my mind is basically stripping out features to basically
and that's the hardest thing. If if you haven't read The Innovator's Dilemma, it's a really great book. I mean, it's about keeping your existing products alive versus trying to do new things. So you have to be really creative, and this is what's hard. So sometimes, for example, of something like a product that's been out there for a while, you may say, all right, we're going to create a freemium version that's cooler and slicker, and we're going to make it free to compete with the ankle biters who are nipping at our heels, but it's going to have an even better experience. In some cases, you may end up creating competing products within your company, but those are some of the decisions that you need to make of how can we tackle this fact that we're becoming the bigger, older product, and there's going to be somebody cooler that comes along. So it's thinking about a different way to version it. In some cases, you may decide that you are going to keep that chugging along, but you're going to do the new, cooler version that's ultimately going to replace the existing one. But it is tough. It's a really tough problem.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pat.
You sort of touched on the management process and hiring talent, and I'm just curious. I mean, what is it, $1.8 billion? And you started a design team 3 years ago, but Citrix was already a pretty good-sized operation, been around since 1989. At what point do you feel that you can sort of hire for attitude and train for skill, which is generally the way that a Trader Joe's or a Virgin America, or I should say Virgin Atlantic even, has generally taken? I mean, in other words, you start, your base employee is not so much the contractor, the experienced person, whatever, it's going to be more likely the intern or the new grad. And so
is the question is how for a culture fit versus functional skills?
That would be my reaction. But again, most of these guys are talking concepts.
Is there an inflection point where maybe you start to? How do you think about that?
No, that's a great question. So when I joined Salesforce.com, it was interesting because I joined there as the first design person. I think at the time there were 5 product managers and maybe 14 engineers, and much different situation than at Citrix. And to me, even in my role, hiring is like the most important thing to me, and it is absolutely a balance of those two things. It is culture fit. People and cultures are different. They're very, very different. I worked at Oracle many years ago, and I often say to the people who come to join Citrix, if you're looking for a place, especially when we first started, if you're looking for a place where I go, here's your desk, you're going to work with Bob and Joe, and here are design guidelines, and this is how we do things, and here's our intranet page about the design team, don't come work here because we don't have any of those things yet. This is startup mode. It's crazy. It's chaotic. You need to be willing to go with the flow, be agile, and if you love that and you love the thought of bringing order to chaos, you're going to love this because it's a really cool opportunity. If you don't, you're going to hate this. You're going to be stressed out. You're going to be freaking out. You're going to be pulling out your hair. Don't do it. So it's being very upfront with people about the kind of environment that they're going to be working in, because otherwise you're going to hire people who are going to hate it or are going to feel like you lied to them, and that's no good. And then skill is key. I mean, I would love to say that I could hire somebody who I think is the nicest person ever, and I've interviewed a lot of these people. I'm like, oh, they're so cool. They're so great. I love them. I love them in the phone screen. But when I bring them in, I go, oh, the work is just not good enough. It's just not good enough. So for every 12 people I probably talk to, it's probably 2 that I decide to bring in for an interview. And it's not to say that those other 10 are not good. They're just not good for what we're looking for. So yeah, you've always got to find both of those things equally important. Then at the end of the day, go with your gut.
Thanks.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. It was great getting a chance to chat with you today.